In the early development of the Americas, the people worked hard and had a different way of living than us today. Back then, it was more restrained of what they could do. One thing that could restrain them was their household items were very different than all the technology we have in our houses today. They also did different activities than we do today, but there are some similarities. Also, our social classes today are very similar to theirs back then. Lastly, back then, they didn't have our advanced transportation. To start off, their houses were very different than our fancy houses today. Remember, this was the 1600s. In their houses back then, they had the basic necessities. For the kids, they had toys like building blocks, dolls, tops, balls, marbles, and kites. Then in their houses, they had windows, doors, carpets, tables, chairs, cuckoo clocks, fireplace, and homemade furniture. The people in these houses made their own furniture from wood and wool from sheep. The family pet would have been the loving cats and dogs. Second, the activities they did back then. The kids played many games we still play today, like London Bridges, hopscotch, and leapfrog. Then there's things that only the boys did, like races, shooting, and wrestling matches. Then the girls, things like quilting and singing. Believe it or not, the adults did things too, like play cards, bowl on flat glasses, have horse races, and work, of course. These activities were what they did on an often basis. They also would fish and do other family activities like go to church. Third, the social classes back then. The old social classes are similar to the ones we have today. They had high society, which was like the high class today, which would be the rich people today. They wore fancy clothes and lived in big houses. Then the middle class, which would be workers like people today. They were farmers, shoemakers, candle makers, etc. Lastly, the peasants and the slaves. These people were the bottom of the barrel. The difference between these two classes is that the slaves had no chance in growing higher in the class unless released by their owner. Last, the people of the time did not have all our fancy ways of transportation today. They had wagons pulled by oxen and horses to get around. These were pulled for long journeys with large groups or family. They also had ferry boats to transport goods, animals, and other things across the water. They also had horses they rode. If the family did not have these ways of transportation, they would just walk.